this community meeting. It is July 1st. Didn't feel like it outside, but hopefully it'll warm up tomorrow. And we'll all be able to get outside. We could have had this meeting outside except tonight. My name's Charlie Johnson. I've been asked to be the moderator of this particular event. In real life, I'm the president of the Fargo-Moorhead Fargo-Moorhead Convention and Visitors Bureau, also West Fargo. And I've been asked to fulfill the role of moderator, so that's what I'm going to do tonight. We're going to have time for questions and answers in a little bit, but first we want to give you a little bit of an overview of the project, after which we'll have a panel up and then you can ask some questions. So for that purpose, I'd like to introduce Jane Alexander, who is the Executive Director of Churches United for the Homeless. She's going to take you through some basic facts. Should take about 10 minutes or so, and then we'll have questions and answers. So welcome, Jane.
Welcome. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. It's really a pleasure to have a chance to talk with you. For the people in the room who are the neighbors of 315 34th Street, the Pineview Cottage residents and the Arbor Park residents, and for the people who own the businesses along that property, we just want you to know that we understand you are upset with us. We know that you have questions. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. And we intend to answer them. That's what tonight is about. We regret that we have not been able to inform you of our plans before now, but we are really grateful that you're here tonight so that we can begin answering questions. Last week, Jen, our Community Center Director, and I had an opportunity to walk through your neighborhood. We were passing out flyers for this community meeting, and we were struck by what a beautiful neighborhood both Pineview Cottages and Arbor Park are. And we had a chance to meet some of you, and you clearly love your neighborhood. You clearly feel passionate about it, and that made us so happy. We want neighbors who love living there. We want neighbors who feel passionate about it. That's the very kind of neighborhood that we want for the families and individuals that need to make a new start. I think there are lots of challenges ahead of us, but I think the conversation that we want to begin tonight, I think, has a chance of leading to what I believe could be the best, most secure, safe, hopeful little corner of Fargo-Moorhead. And I think if we can find a way to join together beginning tonight, I think we will create a welcoming and inclusive community. So there's probably 6 facts that we just need you to know. And the first is that we are building an apartment building. Some people have felt that we're building a wet house. We are not. We are building an apartment building. And it's really important to build an apartment building because there's not enough affordable housing in Fargo-Moorhead. There's a low vacancy rate. There's especially a low amount of 3-bedroom, 2- and 3-bedroom housing and 4-bedroom housing for large families. There are not enough efficiency apartments for people who are trying to work and support themselves. And there is a need for housing that has services to help people stabilize so they don't fall back into the very troubles that contributed to homelessness in the first place. And because the people are in the shelter a long time, waiting to find housing, to find a landlord that will rent to them, even with a rent voucher, the shortage of housing is creating homelessness and prolonging homelessness. We know people who have been homeless and in our shelter looking diligently for housing for 3, 5 months, and even a year. And that is way too long, especially for children, to be in a shelter. This housing that we're building is going to house families with children and singles. The singles will be primarily vets and elderly people and over 55. Anybody who poses a threat to the health, safety, or welfare of the neighbors in the community, the staff at this building, or the residents of the building they will not be able to rent here. This is not where they can live. Security is a top priority. We are going to have security cameras throughout the building. We're going to have a 24-hour staff, and we're going to have limited access. Everybody comes and goes from one door, at which there's a staff person at all times, and it's locked, so people will be admitted as they're recognized. The Moorhead Police Department has great ideas for how to help make this a really secure, the grounds of this really secure, and I hope we maybe will hear about that a little later. And we're intending to build with their recommendations in mind. And finally, we intend to be incredibly good neighbors. I think for all of us who spend time living with people who have struggled with homelessness, we get to know them very well. They are our best friends in time of need in many cases. They are people that I hope you get to know, because they have absolutely changed the lives of the staff people who have gotten to know them. Quickly about the building, there will be 41 units, and we're excited about that number. We need so many units of housing. 24 will be for families. There will be 2, 3, and 4 bedroom apartments for families, and the 17 apartments will be for singles. There will be 9 efficiencies, very hard to come by an efficiency in the Fargo-Moorhead area, and the rest for the singles will be 1 bedroom. There's going to be on-site support. There will be 2 case managers, 1 for singles, 1 for families. We hope maybe to have a youth worker. There will be staffing 24 hours. And at Churches United, we have a lot of support services that we integrate into people's lives going forward, so that when they leave the shelter, they go with support. They go with help from Sanford or from any of a number of really fine service providers. Some of those folks will come see people right at our building, and then others will go out into the community to see them. And of course, we'll have security. I think I've mentioned quite a bit about that. The location is really exciting for us. I think that, when we're trying to create home for people who don't have a home, the best guide is to think about what we ourselves need in a home, and what we ourselves would like in a neighborhood, especially with children in mind. And this neighborhood is so wonderfully both residential but close to some businesses. And the residential piece, as I mentioned earlier, as we were walking through, it feels so friendly and so safe and positive that this would be a great way for people to begin anew. It's for people who are moving into this apartment building, they don't have a lot of money and they do not have cars for the most part. So for them to be able to walk to a grocery store to get good food, and to be able to walk to a place to get inexpensive clothing for their children is huge. It will make their lives so much more livable, so that they can focus on their next and better steps. I think that's all really that we needed to share, and really now the main part of this meeting is for you to ask your questions, and we will do our best to respond.
Thank you, Jane. Okay, Jane's going to stay up and be part of our panel discussion, but we'd also like to invite Pastor Lauren Mellum, who is the pastor at Our Savior's Lutheran. He also happens to be the president of the board for Churches United for the Homeless. And the other board member with us is the vice president, Dara Lee. She also happens to be executive director of Clay County Housing and Redevelopment Authority. So they're here to answer your questions. And we have some other people in the audience who might be able to respond. Some city people were kind enough to come in case there were questions that they can answer better than the rest of us can. So it's time for some questions. We have 2 roving microphones. They are staffed by Andrea. Wave at the crowd. Andrea's on my left, your right. And Lisa on my right, your left. So we would like, if you have a question, just raise your hand, they'll come to you. And if you can, it would be helpful if you could stand up and stand as you are able. So we're opening it up for questions. I'm going to preempt you for one that asked me to go first, then we'll come back to you, sir. Maybe, Andrea, maybe you want to make your way over to that. You got one here? Okay. First, we're going to, Jessica wanted to make a statement here before we move forward. Jessica, it's all yours.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Jessica Benson, and I live in the Plenty Cottages community. I moved there prior to becoming a community older community, so I was able to stay. So far, it has been a nice, quiet neighborhood to live in with great neighbors. I'm very thankful for this opportunity to speak tonight about your complex my home except for medical appointments due to my health issues. I typically spend 70% of my day in bed, but I really felt this was important to be here tonight to express my concerns. Pineview Cottages is immediately west of this site. Most of my neighbors are well over 55. Some of them are even over 100 years old. Some of us also live with significant physical, mental, and emotional challenges. I'm also aware of an assisted living adult daycare facility and a long-term care facility that are immediately in this area, as well as numerous families with young children. To my knowledge, no one in the community knew anything about this project until reading about it in the Fargo Forum, which I read about it on June 8th, the day before the Moorhead City Council was scheduled to give a resolution of support. Several of my neighbors attended this meeting and found the City Council relatively uninformed about this project that was almost finalized. My neighbors have also attended subsequent city meetings and county meetings to no avail. Instead of meeting with those in the community to discuss the potential site and listen to our concerns, I feel that we're now hosting the site to tell us what's going to happen in our community. It's easy to avoid the not in my backyard argument when the neighborhood doesn't know anything about these plans until they're almost finalized. I have no problem helping homeless families. I contribute to Churches United, and I plan to continue to do so as long as God allows. I also have minimal concerns about how this will affect the value of my home after some research that I've done on my own. I do, however, have significant safety concerns, especially after I read in the forum, the article that I read in the forum which stated, and I quote, "The new apartment complex will not require residents to sober up or to get mental health counseling. As a former healthcare provider, I have seen how unpredictable and violent the behaviors of individuals under the influence of various substances and or dealing with mental health issues can be, as I live with the after effects of a traumatic brain injury sustained at the hand of a mental health patient. Also, individuals with substance abuse issues usually have a source of these substances. This can bring people into the neighborhood that would not normally be there and increase the potential for crime. My neighbors have already encountered people coming into our development asking for the Churches United offices so they can sign up for this complex. I think the on-site 24-hour supervision and security proposed for the complex is great, but what about the security and safety concerns for people in the surrounding neighborhoods and local businesses? My health took a turn for the worse about a year ago, leaving me totally dependent on others for my care. My amazing mother has literally moved in with me to become my primary caregiver. She does, however, frequently walk around the neighborhood for exercise, to shop at the local businesses, and I feel comfortable with this. However, with this new complex in the neighborhood, I'm not sure I would want my mother or my neighbors walking around this neighborhood alone at any time of day. My mother also leaves to go shopping, go to church, or run other errands, leaving me alone for several hours, several times a week, which would cause a concern for both of us. Anyone walking through my backyard on the diet, which is already a daily occurrence, can easily see through my windows and see that I am defenseless and most likely alone. I already keep my doors locked, but that wouldn't be much of a deterrent to someone who was really determined to get in. I'm very thankful that Moorhead is so concerned about the homeless, and that the mayor was quoted as saying that she wouldn't have a problem with this in my neighborhood by any means, but I would really like her opinion on how she would feel if this was in her parents' backyard. I really appreciate your time and allowing me the opportunity to voice my concerns. Like I said, I don't usually go anywhere after this time of day because of my current medical issues. And if you have any questions for me, I will be leaving soon because I am contributing constant. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Does anybody want to address any of the issues that Jessica brought up, or should we move on to the next question? Pass the mic over there. Dara. That's good enough. You don't have to be real close.
Thank you, first of all, so much for coming out tonight, Jessica. I appreciate so much when community members are really willing to be an active part of their neighborhood and come out and get the facts and find out what is going on. And my guess is that you did an excellent job of summarizing most of the concerns in the room. Do folks agree with that? That I think you really hit And those concerns are exactly why we wanted to have this opportunity to come and meet with the community. And so the first kind of thing in the series is, why didn't you come and talk to us ahead of time? Why did we have to read about it in the Fargo Forum? Why didn't you come and talk to us ahead of time? And that is exactly how I would feel if I were in your position. I guess it's a series of unfortunate events. But the timing issues that we were working with is that we did not know until June 20th if we were actually going to go through with this deal or not. There was still environmental testing going on the property. We did not get our Phase 2 environmental report back until June 20th of this year. Up until that point, it was in there as a contingency, and so we had the opportunity to withdraw at that point in time if that report did not show that there was significant cost due to contamination on the property. The report came back clean, but that was really the first date and time where the purchase of the property was a final go-ahead. We had looked at it as far as we had a number of contingencies involved with the deal, and at no point in time were we sure that this sale was going to go through until all of those were investigated and resolved. That probably doesn't make you any happier, but that was the situation that we were working with. We did examine a number of properties, took a number of them into consideration, and you guys have a fabulous neighborhood that we are really interested in being good neighbors in. Regarding who will be living in the property, and I'm sure Jane can add to this much more than I, but I'm the director of a housing authority. I wish that I would have the opportunity in managing the units that we have to have the opportunity that Churches United is going to have. They actually live with the people who are going to be moving into their property before they move in. I don't know of any other landlord in town that gets to test drive having a potential tenant as somebody that they live with 24 hours a day over an extended period of time. They're able to get to know folks, to get to judge their behaviors. You spoke about folks with untreated mental health and or chemical dependency issues and some of the issues that can arise around those. One of the conditions of living at Churches United is that you have to be able to maintain sobriety. You have to be able to be a good neighbor when your neighbor is in a bunk 2 feet away from you. There are children, many infants, that come directly home from being born at the hospital into that shelter. You need to be a person that the entire facility feels comfortable with you being around a newborn baby. We also have seniors living at the shelter and numerous veterans. You have to be somebody, if you're going to stay at that shelter, that we trust. And if you engage in behaviors that we do not feel comfortable with, you will be asked to leave the shelter and you will never have an opportunity to move into these apartments. So I understand your concerns. They're very legitimate, but we believe we have structures in place that make us able to screen people at a level that most landlords would love to have.
Okay, I think we've answered that question. We should probably get to some more questions. You have one over here, and then Lisa, there's a gentleman back here who has a question. Maybe you can make your way back to the middle right in front of the camera, second table. Okay, Andrew.
I'm just very curious what this homelessness is going to consist of. Those that already are present at Churches United or what? Today I had the incident of a person stopping and he looked like he was just searching things out. And so he just sat there. So I went out to him and he asked where you can fill out an application for the community living. And I looked at him very strange and I said, excuse me, sir, but these are all residents that purchased these. Well, I want an application. Where's your office? I said, sir, this is not the area. Well, I was told it was by Kmart. And but the point is, are you going to invite new homeless rather than what there is? Because I do think this is a concern. This fellow had a beautiful car. I don't have that nice of a car. And anyway, and he wanted an application. How is this word getting out already? And So where are you going to get these homeless from?
You done? Okay, who wants to tackle that? Pastor Moore?
I think there is, like has been mentioned, a broad range of homelessness, particularly when the site was being looked at. We have had a maximum of 50 children at the shelter on a daily basis. The Moorhead Public School Bus picks up children there to school. If you, like many of you, have served in the shelter, I know. For the board of directors, as we looked at sites, I mean, that's the primary audience, people who are currently in the shelter and receiving casework. However, your conversation you had just with a passerby indicates, one, a curiosity and perhaps a need, whereas word has been in the papers. I mean, people are resourceful, and so they're asking questions. But as the board and the staff, we've been primarily looking at the people we are serving now, because when we can have people who can move into a shelter, into a home situation. I mean, sheltering is good, but we really know that the home provides stability. And so when we're thinking about veterans who we deeply care for, people who are over 55, and for families with children who we know in the shelter who are receiving services or relationship, they are the people we hope and intend will move in and become residents and have priority. That also opens up the First Avenue Churches United site for maybe some others who that is truly the site that fits them. But as far as the children who we already know there, we know they need a home rather than the shelter.
Okay, back here, Lisa.
Yes, hi. Say, when you were showing your presentation there, you showed a front elevation of the apartment building, but not a layout, a master plan, or anything on the setbacks or how it sits on that property. And also, that's a large piece of land. Is that apartment building the only structure that's going on there, or do you have future plans for other structures and other things there?
I'll start with the first part and I'll let Mayor finish up.
Okay, which part are you going to answer?
I'm going to answer the first part first. As far as the master plan and the layout, the reason we didn't show it is because we're really interested in getting that community feedback. Those are decisions that did not need to be finalized yet. And so we are very open to what the neighborhood is interested in as far as the placement of that. We, of course, want it to be in a place that is safe for children so that they can ride bikes and trikes, so that the folks who are living there also feel comfortable walking in the neighborhood, and that items are accessible. But once again, our primary goal is to have a safe, secure, wonderful addition to the neighborhood, and we are very open to whatever feedback that you may have on that.
Lauren, did you want to add something? Did we answer both parts of your question? The future plans. What do you have other plans for that lot?
This is specifically our first phase. The third week of October, the Minnesota Housing Authority will find out whether the first phase is funded. And so in the next 2 years, we'll be looking, if it's funded, this is 2 years out as far as the 41 unit being put up. And it'll take about 2.5 acres of the 10-acre site. The next phases are still very much in conversation. We as a board and staff, and actually we had 40 stakeholders last year from the community weigh in, and Fargo and Moorhead listening closely in what was needed. Many people mentioned a daycare that is affordable. A very significant part of parenting is providing for your children, and so that has been talked about. It is not in the planning stages. There has also been the concept of a family-type shelter. However, that takes conditional use permits and things like that in the planning stages. So in our stakeholders in the strategic planning, we've listened to what they see as the needs of the Fargo-Moorhead population. What we know right now is we're building an apartment complex. Phase 2 could be an apartment complex. Permanent housing puts a home in place for people. And so one part of being together tonight is for us to have a listening ear, but we also have the mission of the shelter and people in mind. And as we keep listening to what the next phase is, that will come into view much later.
Okay. I got one over here first, this gentleman.
This sounds very much to me like a foot in the door type of policy that we're going to put in 41 units. And if I'm reading between the lines properly, that means 160 units possible in that piece of property. Is that true? Are we looking at possibly 160 units down the road? What does the city allow? What are the perimeters under which you can operate?
Dara?
As far as the density restrictions, I would leave that. I believe there may be some city staff in the room that could address that, because quite frankly, we haven't even considered that as a board yet. We don't have any hidden plan. We haven't discussed filling the units, the site with units. What we've been just focused on, quite frankly, because we've been on a really tight train ride here due to some opportunities that came up in Minnesota in this past legislative session, is trying to figure out a way to construct 41 units.
Like I said, foot in the door.
That was never our real intention. We saw a wonderful...
We're sitting here and are part of that neighborhood. Once we get our foot in the door, we let you know what we're going to do with the rest of it. We don't want that type of an operation. We want to know, what are we getting into?
Right now, we are looking at constructing 41 units of affordable housing. We are listening and hope that we have done no further decision-making on that property, and we really want to have that opportunity, now that we actually own the land as of yesterday, to have that ongoing dialogue to determine what is the best use of the remaining property.
The magic word there is right now. That doesn't make us feel good. We'd like to know why.
And we don't know that answer. We haven't made any
How can you
decisions.
ask for our cooperation if you don't know the answer?
We're hoping for your input at this point on that, the remaining use.
That's one of them.
Where are we at? We should go over on this. We got one back there. We'll get to you. Just keep your hand. Bring your hand up again later. Yes, sir.
On that 5 units that you could put in there, or 4 more units, how high can they be? You're showing us a plan here that's 3 stories, so we got another 4 units that could be 8 stories. So this 41 units, it could blossom to be an awful large area. We got large apartment houses already in the area. So again, you're asking us, open the gate, we're coming in, and step aside, because we don't know what we're going to do with it in the next few years. Is that right?
I really appreciate that the unknown of this is scary, and I want to promise you that what we're going to put there is going to be good for the people who are in our shelter, to make a positive step. And I don't want us to assume that that's going to bring the neighborhood down. We need to build something that is going to uplift everybody, that brings green space and play space and safe walkways and accessible roads. And I don't want us to assume that the people that we're housing, who, if we extend our families far enough, we probably have somebody who could be in this situation too. We ourselves could be. So we're trying to create spaces that you would want to live in, and a feeling that continues the feeling you have there. And I don't want to assume that we're not going to get there. I believe we are.
You have someone over here? We had someone back. This lady first, and then where's Lisa? Lisa, where are you going? Come up right up front here, this lady. Thank you for standing up there.
I just had a comment.
Wait for the microphone, please.
The more I sit and listen each meeting I've been at, we hear 2 things. One is these are good people, and I believe you. And the second thing is, we have a homeless problem and we need to help. I believe that. Then you turn around and say, we have full-time security inside our building. And these are good neighbors. Now there's a conflict. And everything you say has been that way. I'm sorry, but I go home and I am more confused than when I came, because I'm being told 2 things. One thing is, we're going to build an apartment complex in your neighborhood. then the next thing we know, oh, but we might put in a daycare, we might put in a workshop, we're going to put this in and that in. That is not, this is getting to be a whole conglomerate unit, not an apartment building. You're putting in the whole unit. And if you need that, and if that's the future, our area cannot sustain it. We are 52 homes, condominiums right next to you. We cannot handle that kind of influx of people. That maybe you are looking at a bigger area that you need. Maybe you need to be further away from what is there and let people build up around. Have you looked at other sites?
Ma'am, for a point of clarification, it would help me if you would say, when you say your neighborhood can't handle, what do you mean you can't handle?
Pineview Cottages is 52 condominium units. We are senior citizens, we are disabled. We, as 52 units, cannot handle either the traffic or if there's problems. We are not capable of handling that. We're not big enough.
Okay, thank you for...
We're not a big enough area. And we go back into Arbor Park, and Arbor Park has some of our professional people, which we also do. But when we hear people who work in the police department, with the mental health centers, that are registered nurses, these people are getting up and saying, we can't handle it in our neighborhood with our children, and they know what they're talking about because they work with this on a daily basis. I think the area of Moorhead you're looking at is too small. That north end does not have enough homes to sustain a large population with special needs. If you wanted to help, I would think you would build 5 apartment buildings around all over the Fargo-Moorhead area that you want to serve and have smaller groups. And neighbors can handle that pressure. Also, we're told tonight on the sheet that we were given, tonight we're going to have the police answer our questions and concerns. I don't know how many apartment buildings have given that to their neighbors, where the police need to answer their concerns and questions. So you're telling me this is a problem. I mean, you're saying this. And then you're turning around and saying, no, we are good neighbors and we are good for your area. You're telling me 2 things.
And I understand how you get that impression, but what we're saying is we're better than the regular landlord that comes in. We are saying we are landlords that come in here and cooperate with the police department up front. We are not somebody who sits around and waits for problems to happen. We want to be proactive in our design. We want to be proactive in our communications with you. We want to be proactive with the systems that we set up in place to make sure we are the best neighbors you could possibly have. And our goal is to be proactive. It is to be responsive to you. And it is to involve the experts. I don't claim to know more than the chief of police about how to design a secure facility, that we want to prevent problems before they start. And I think that's why you're hearing that conflict.
I would just like to add that it's been an amazing realization to me that the generosity of people when they finally get a home is huge, and they are very welcoming to others who are homeless. And they, very often they run into some troubles with their current landlord because they've housed someone too long or too many, and they have brought problems. So some of what we're trying to build into this is support so that someone's abusive husband, somebody who punched a hole in the wall and got her evicted several times, somebody who, is trying not to have relatives come and stay there, so they have support in being able to focus on just what they need to focus on. It's all about helping each of these individuals get what they need to make steps forward. And the security is more about the focus rather than about anything that's going on in the building.
Pastor, quick, and then we'll get to another question.
As a person who's always learning about homelessness, and I think we are, it is hard to understand that sometimes the security would be for the protection of those living in the residence, like Jay was just mentioning. As far as other sites, when we looked at them, and when we're dealing with children and families, when we looked at more industrial sites, like a place to put those people, we really quickly came to the point that everybody deserves, if they're a child, to grow up with some green space close, to have a safe neighborhood. And right now, just right there is Cashwise, right there is Walmart. So it's not totally a neighborhood, but it is on the edge of a neighborhood. And so as far as selecting a site, that was an important part of it.
Okay, another question, this lady right here. Whichever one of you, I saw one hand, I don't know if it's, who it is.
I guess, and I've talked to many people, I guess the thing that kind of keeps coming back to me is the way that we were told as a neighborhood. It really did kind of offend us because nobody came around and canvassed our neighborhood and let us know, and you kind of gave an explanation about that, but I did read a proverb the other day that really kind of struck me. It said, an offended brother is harder to be won over than a strong city, and I think that's what's happened. You know, I think you've really offended our neighborhood because you weren't upfront and honest, and it does feel like deception when you push it through the city council or the commission and don't disclose the location, even though we're told later that you did know. And then it's hard for us to believe that you do want to be good neighbors. I mean, I really do want to believe you, but it's hard to believe that when what we're staking it on is kind of what feels like deception and not the truth. And especially as a Christian organization, that's really tough to get over as a person, as a Christian myself, you know. And I guess for us, you know, Jane knows that I do want to say I appreciate this, though. I appreciate that you want to talk to us. And I would appreciate that you continue to be open and honest and disclose things up front before we hear them in the news, so that we can learn to trust you. Because I'm all for helping those that need help. I've been in the jail system. I was a chaplain for 14 months at the Cass County Jail. I know people. I've prayed for their kids with them. I know that they need a place.
Thank you, Amber.
Okay. Anybody want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'll start. First of all, Amber and I have had some conversations, and I really appreciate her perspective. And just to add to her story, just to be fair to Amber, she's a foster mother, and she has, a family right on the other side. I think that, oh dear, I might have lost my train of thought here. I'll get it again.
Well, and I'll repeat myself, and Charlie will chastise me for talking too much, but I, as I started out, would probably feel exactly the same way that you do. It was never our intention to have this come out as a surprise in the news. That was never our goal. Unfortunately, and I'm going to take ownership and responsibility for my full role in this, we were extremely mission-focused at that point in time. The legislature in Minnesota did not wrap up or did not pass their bonding bill for housing money until mid-May. So it wasn't until mid-May we knew what the potential funding was available. And then we looked around to see, we were still hoping and praying some other organization or entity would step forward to apply for funds to help to end homelessness in our community, and nobody else could step up to the table. And I'm sure everybody in this community does not want homeless folks living in our community. And the best way to end homelessness is to have a house for people to live in. And so that was our focus, and too much our laser focus, was how can we take every step that we can right now, right this very minute, to put together an application to Minnesota Housing to make our application even viable. This is an extremely complicated process with a lot of moving parts. We could not find even a for-profit developer to come in and take on the workload because they said it's too much. It can't get done in that time frame. And we said, well, we think it has to because we want to end homelessness in our community. And so we were on a freight train trying to put the pieces together in order to have even a viable application. We still don't know if this project will even be funded, but we knew that there was no way it would be funded if we didn't get it finished. And in order to get it finished, we had to have every human manpower hour available to get those critical components in there. And in an ideal world, and even in a not so ideal world, we would have been at every one of your doors, sorry, because I feel bad, knocking, explaining it to you, asking you for your support, asking you what your concerns were. That's what we wanted. We did not have the physical capability of doing it at that point in time, and we couldn't even hire anybody to do it. So I apologize. I personally am very sorry. That was never our intention.
Okay,
I remember what I was going to say.
we have one question, so let's keep
Okay. Very quickly, I think that, as people moving into a neighborhood, you do the choosing. In any neighborhood, the people who are already there never get to choose. I mean, and that's just the way of the world. And we are trying very hard to be inclusive, but a for-profit developer putting, 8 stories there wouldn't have asked. Somebody putting a liquor store there wouldn't have asked. And by virtue of the way it's zoned, the city does not require that. So you're asking us to do a format that there's not exactly a formula for. We're trying to do it now, and we should have done it sooner, but nobody else does this. And we're in the position of asking permission to house homeless people, and that feels awkward.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go back here. Andrea, this gentleman.
My name is Dwayne Priggle. I'm a Catholic priest. I served the diocese parish of Dilworth a number of years, and I can't tell the number of dozens of people that I personally housed in my rectory over those years, gladly. And they were homeless veterans, they were people looking for employment, all kinds of types of people. And so I commend all people who are concerned about the homeless, because maybe many of you who are here have housed them and continue to house them. I commend you for a very Christ-like kind of service to the community. We know also, by the way, I worked at Bemidji, I worked in Crookston. Both places have massive amounts of homelessness, and Bemidji is now a very homeless community as well. So this kind of project needs and really is so basic to the cause of the entire community and for the good of the entire community. I commend you.
All right, thank you. Andrea, I think we'll have another question up here. That'll be next. Lisa, right there. Good.
Hi. I keep hearing about the veteran name being thrown out. I'm 25 years in the military, still active. My wife is 15. She's still active. And we know that there are programs for the veterans already. Minnesota and North Dakota, they both have. So I'm not quite sure what the reference to veteran homelessness is. But as far as we know, that's being addressed. I just want to do some rumor control. I was out of town last week, and literally I had my wife calling me, telling me all about this last week. So it seems like it's happening very fast with no prior knowledge in our neighborhood of what's going on. So I'll piggyback a little bit on what a lot of people have been saying. And the first is this, and I'm not familiar with some of these terms, but my understanding is there is already a plan for at least 4 buildings on this property. You can shake your head. I'm just telling you what I've heard. I know Roars Construction is the property master of this. I've heard from people that there is more than 1 building being planned. Maybe the funding's not there, but you just said it's 10 acres of property, and I have a hard time believing that 1 building is going to sit on 10 acres.
Oh, excuse me for a second. I just want to make sure everybody's listening. They did say they are talking about other buildings on that property. They just don't have hard and set plans for it.
Understand.
So they're not trying to say they're not building another building there. And I think we need to, I hope you'll listen when you answer the question.
Okay. I'll continue. I'd also like to know Because another rumor, and this is rumor dispelling right now, is that the people that are going into these properties don't qualify for Section 8, or whatever the term is for it, housing that's along 20th Street and over on the east side of Walmart already. So that tells me that we're getting people that are even more substandard. Not just homeless, but they don't even qualify for that homelessness. So I'd like to know about that. And the third thing I'd like to hear from is the Moorhead Police Department on how many calls have increased since the building that went up just to the west of Churches United has gone up. How many police responses are we going to hear in our neighborhood? Because I've heard it's considerable. I have an 18-month-old, I have a 2.5-year-old, and I have an 8-year-old. And we're already talking to realtors. That's all I have.
Okay, 3 questions. First question is, again, what are your plans for the rest of the site? You do have plans down the road to do something else. There could be another apartment building, could be 2 apartment buildings. How set in stone are those plans? You also talked about a daycare. So that's question number 1, right, sir? That was your first question? Yeah. Okay, let's address that again.
Exactly like I mentioned before, we interviewed with a consultant 40 stakeholders in the Fargo-Moorhead area. There were a lot of different ideas. One was a family-type shelter needed. One was a daycare, and then permanent housing. And so we zeroed in on because of funding and because we know that permanent housing stabilizes families, we zeroed in on an apartment. And so the next phases of strategic planning, obviously it is 10 acres. We're not in the business of mowing all of that, even though it's not been mowed that great recently. We will enter into other stages to figure out what would fulfill the mission of Churches United and the Fargo-Moorhead area. But we're not there. Right now, we are looking for funding to see if it comes through in October, and we pick up our next phase of strategic planning likely in the fall or this winter.
Okay, second question was about the people who would qualify for this housing and whether or not they qualify for other housing. Did I get that right? Yes. Okay.
Okay, and this is where I can actually speak as the executive director of the Clay County Housing Authority, because we are the entity that administers the largest pool of Section 8 or Housing Choice vouchers for Clay County. And I believe also, I don't want to leave out your question about veterans, and I think you said you thought that veterans issues were being addressed. The reality is that we live in a fabulous community. And a lot of people like to move to our community, and our housing shortage is getting dire. I have not figured out how to fix this problem. We have people looking for units today, right at this moment, who have assistance to help pay their rent, so that they're still paying 30% of their income towards the rent, and that we would pay the difference to the landlord. And they have support services with them, like through the Veterans Administration, and they cannot find a place to live. This market is so tight that it is extremely challenging to find a place to live. So we have been in cooperation with the Veterans Affairs in Fargo, the VA hospital, because they have a social services department, and they have said we would do anything in order to get an actual physical apartment that we could move our folks in, that they would have a safe place to live, that they would have a place where things worked and it was well maintained. And so we're trying to, because for what people can afford and what might be open in this community, it's not a place I want to live in, and I want our people to live in places I want to live. The second part is these folks aren't eligible for Section 8. That's completely not true. 110% not true. A lot of them will be going into these units actually even with Section 8 vouchers. The only issue with Section 8 is that our waiting lists are extremely long, and our list and the Moorhead Public Housing Agency list is closed. You can't even apply for Section 8 right now. Our lists are so long. And so that resource just is not available in our community at this time. And so that is a myth, and I thank you for that opportunity to clarify that.
Okay, and the third question was about the police call, sir. Chief Ebbinghaart, could we call on you to come help us out with this one? Where's the nearest microphone? Lisa, can you get the microphone to the chief?
concerns about the call load at 1817 First Avenue North, which is Gateway Gardens. I heard those concerns citing the number of police calls well before we actually ran the police calls at the request of the city council member. So I'm not sure what numbers people are looking at. Initially, when it opened up, there were some rough spots, and it did not reflect in an unusually high number of calls. But about a year ago, Sergeant Matheson, who's with me here today, met with the staff there. We have been very impressed at how cooperative and how concerned they are in dealing with issues that may arise. And when you look at call numbers, and again, Gateway Gardens itself does not have a surprising number of calls considering it's a multi-residential location. You got to look at it in context. If you go by call numbers to identify a problem area, the worst building we have in the city of Moorhead is the Law Enforcement Center, closely followed by the high school, middle school, Hornbachers, the library. The number of calls very often reflects on the fact that you've got numerous people there, you have people coming there seeking services. One of the things that's notable when we look at the calls that we respond to at Gateway Garden to some extent, but certainly in the homeless shelter, is a number of these people are frequently victimized. And this is the first safe place they've come to where they can report being victimized at other locations at other times. Particularly when you have families or women who are homeless, there's an incredible degree of victimization here. And we do send a lot of police officers out there to take reports on how these people were assaulted, abused, and had other incidents occur at other locations. One of the best ways we could do to cut down on those numbers is to get people in a safe place. And that is our objective. We've been approached by Churches United to work with them on CEPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design concepts as they develop this property. Part of that is concerns about pedestrian traffic, about people who don't live in the complex coming in and creating problems. If you talk to any property management people or landlords, you're going to find one of the primary problems you've got in apartment complexes, and we deal with them on a regular basis, is people who are coming in to create problems, who have prior relationships. There seems to be an awareness of that, and the security measures that are taken at this facility would be at least the first line in addressing that and getting us there to deal with it. Another concept that we've got to kind of keep in mind when we look at this is an apartment complex. It is 41 units, and somebody's going to build an apartment complex. Most of the ones that go up don't approach us and say, how can we make it safe, and what can we do to make it better before they build it. And lastly, the same rules apply to Churches United as apply to anybody else. We have a crime-free multi-housing project here and rental registration in the city of Moorhead. They've got to get a rental registration permit from the city to rent these apartments. If they don't control their tenants, and we have more than 3 police calls on any tenant out there or any residents, if they don't evict them, we're going to revoke their rental registration. If they want to stay in business, they got to follow the same rules that every rental property in the city follows. So this is not a situation where you're going to have recurring problems with a troubled tenant. I think if they aren't interested in keeping it safe, which I truly believe they are, we're going to hold them accountable with the rental registration and crime-free multi-housing requirements.
Thank you, Chief. Lisa, this lady's had her hand up for a while over here, so she'll be next. This gentleman says you didn't answer the question, how many calls have you had to Gateway Gardens? Do you have that off the top of your head?
Calls for service in 2013, 16 calls for service in 2014, total 46, not unusual.
And I'm just going to, I want to be completely upfront and honest that the Housing Authority is the owner of Gateway Gardens. concerns, and so I don't want anybody to think that I'm hiding that sitting up here. But we contract with 24-hour staff, and they are instructed, if there's anything that looks unusual, if anybody needs any type of help, you call the police. It's not your job to intervene. And I think we have folks with medical issues. We call for a lot of medical assists. The Moorhead Police Department has been fabulous to work with, but a lot of those calls are for help, to try and decide what the best tack is to take in the situation.
Okay, thank you, Dara. Yes, ma'am.
First, I would like to say that I think that what you guys are doing is very beautiful, compassionate, and wise, and an answered prayer of mine that I've been praying for 4 years, so thank you. I was wondering if you guys could let us know how many people are actually homeless in their community, if you know about the number, and where they're sleeping if they're not in housing.
The numbers, about 1,000, Dara says. Where they're sleeping when they're not there, I know for a fact they sleep along the river. There was a man who was in our longer-term shelter, wasn't able to find housing, rode his bike to Monoghan, where he lived for a while, and with family, and rode his bike back with the dog, a little puppy, 11-month-old puppy, 94 miles over many hours. He is living outside because there isn't a place for him and his dog. And he sleeps under a tarp. He sleeps on a tarp and under a tarp. We're trying very hard to get him housing, but it's really hard. The last time he had a landlord was in '95. So that kind of qualifies as not a lot of credit. I think he was evicted for non-payment. So, those folks and before he came to our program, he lived in a storage shelter, and people paid for that storage shelter. Other homeless folks paid for his storage shelter so he would have a place to come inside the storage shed. So that's just one, and he's outside because he has a dog.
You said about 1,000 in the Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo area. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, my name is Beth. I live in our recognition, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to speak tonight. I do have a lot of concern. Safety is the primary thing that I'm looking at for my children, as well as our neighbors' children, and I'm feeling a sense of loss of that even now, before we've even begun. You say you're mission-focused. You're mission-focused on a mission, or your mission, without regard to our concerns. It was expeditiously done, and I do have trouble trusting what you just said. I want to be completely upfront and honest. I'm going to have trouble trusting the things that we're told from now on. I really am. My daughter was teary-eyed the other day and said, Mom, are we going to have to move because neighbors are talking about moving? They're talking about moving. They're scared. And I said, I don't know. I don't know what's happening. I'm trying to get more information. I'm trying to get the facts. And she said, well, I have to carry mace. Well, I have to carry mace when I'm outside playing. She's scared. I'm scared. The safety of our neighborhood will not be what it is today. It will not. With bringing in a population that is in need, they are in need. I wholeheartedly believe that they need a place to be. That place is not on 34th Street, Moorhead. It is not. I implore you, I implore everybody here to go to this site and look around. You will realize that this is not the place for this proposed development. They need a place. I believe that 100%. I support that 100%. It's just not in our backyard. With respect to how this was handled, June 2nd or 3rd was a meeting where the met with the county commission, and what you needed was just an elected body to say, yes, we're in support of this. We're in support of homeless housing. And indeed, that was granted. What was granted was support for homeless housing in the county of Clay County, not at 34th Street, Moorhead. Clay County is a very big county. there's a more reasonable place for this population where the services are closer, they have access to everything that they need, they have facilities for children where they can be out there playing and riding around. There's not going to be places for those children right now, and 34th Street is a very busy street. Think about your clientele. I really don't think this is the right place for them. And I appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you. This gentleman in front's been waiting. Well, then we'll go back there again. This gentleman's also been waiting. I think you've already addressed those issues, so thank you for your comments. Yes, sir. You're up.
First of all, I'd like to start out by saying that Churches United saying that they were being proactive. This is insulting to all of us because there was nothing proactive with it at all. It was snuck in under the radar. We found out after the fact you've already bought the property. So this whole meeting is useless for us because it's already going to happen. The next thing is the whole security thing. I'm not worried about the security of your building. I'm worried about the security of my neighborhood. Putting cameras and locking people out that are drunk out of your building is never going to do nothing but push them into our neighborhood. We already see it from the other Churches United building on First Avenue North. They sleep in the shelter belt behind our neighborhood. Where are the police on that? You know, we don't need that population. So when they come there and you don't let them in, they're coming to the next closest place, which is my backyard, his backyard, everybody's backyard. You don't have enough housing there to provide for everybody, so where are they going to go? You tell me, where are they going to go? They're going to come to my yard. My neighborhood, the same place they're coming now. The whole thing with the, you're just like you follow the same guidelines as every other apartment complex. Well, that's not true because you told us you will not be doing background checks. If I go to get an apartment, I have to have a background check. I asked you at the last meeting, I said, will there be felons living there? Well, yeah, there will be felons living there. Will there be drug addicts? Well, yeah. Well, if I'm a felon and a drug addict, chances are I'm not going to get an apartment anywhere. So if that's the case, if you're following the same guidelines as every other apartment complex, as the Moorhead police chief said, I just don't believe you are. I think that, if you want it in your backyard, it's fine, but I choose not to live with felons and thieves and drug addicts. That's just my point.
Okay. Chief, I thought all the restrictions were the same in all apartment complexes. Is that not correct? I want to get back to him on this first before we go.
These are consequences are the same. Who any landlord lets live in his apartment complex is the decision of the management. We don't give guidelines where we say these people can't live in a rental property. We do encourage backgrounds, and it's my understanding backgrounds are going to be conducted. We were assured of that in the meeting. The backgrounds will be conducted in this instance.
Okay.
But again, if you have a problem tenant and you get more than 2 complaints involving that tenant that lead to a disorderly report, if you haven't evicted them, you're at risk of losing your rental permit.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. If you don't let them in, they come to my house.
Well, let's go. Let's stick to the. Well, I want to get the answer on on what kind of background check should.
Okay, first of all, we will be doing background checks.
What kind of background check?
We will be doing criminal background checks. We will be doing prior rental background checks. And we will also be doing checks with other people who have been in close proximity, i.e. if they were staying at the Dorothy Day Shelter, we would be checking in with staff there on what their behavior was like, what their hygiene is like, what their respect for property and their neighbors is like. Because and I think this is what Jane was talking about before, we are not going to have a clear, this is why it's challenging, because it's supportive housing, black and white, this happened, so then this will happen. We are going to look at, do you currently pose a threat to the neighborhood, to your neighbors in the apartment building, to the staff working there, or to the physical integrity of this property? This is a major investment being made on a lot of levels if it does happen to be. And we need those guarantees as much as you do.
How do we know that your next door is going to have to be better?
That has never been discussed. We have discussed community gardens, but we have not discussed anything aligned. We're not a treatment entity. We're not a treatment organization. The other thing is you talked about the fact that there are currently homeless people living right on that lot right now. And I think that that's a really relevant fact. There are a number of homeless families and children who are sleeping in the Walmart parking lot probably tonight. There are a number of folks who are homeless who are sleeping in that shelter about tonight. And by creating affordable housing, what we do is free up room inside the shelters and hopefully draw them away from neighborhoods that do not have facilities, restrooms, showers in place to adequately serve them or to assist them in overcoming their issues. Once again, this is an apartment building. If it's an apartment building where you know that there's security on site, you're not as likely to come and visit.
Okay, Pastor, you want to address that once more before we move to another question?
I just think we need to be wise to say that in the neighborhoods we live in, there are people with addictions. Any neighborhood. There are people that have felonies or somewhere in their history. And the word substandard was a category used tonight speaking about we don't want substandard people living near us. I think you listen to anybody's story in our faith communities or in our Fargo Moorhead community and you discover that many people have poverty in their history. And we can help alleviate that in some way and maybe help them stabilize and move forward. Would there be somebody that turns out at risk living in this apartment? Could be, but in my neighborhood or yours or wherever all of us live, there can be somebody equally as at risk. And I guess when we speak about different categories, we need to be in the midst of kind of the fear and anxiety, be wise about that too when we think about it.
I have one follow-up question that I'd like to ask because I think we're not addressing one of the issues that you brought up, sir. So let me pose it to you guys this way. Let's say I apply and I get housing in this building. Let's say I'm a single guy and I've got housing in one of your efficiency apartments. Everything's going fine, but then one night I show up and the staff see me coming in and they need to let me in and I'm obviously drunk and belligerent. What are you going to do? What's your staff member instructed to do? This is what you're asking about, right, sir?
Well, if they're belligerent and posing a harm to the staff person at the door, we'll call the police. If they are able to get to their apartment and they're not, I mean, you said they're belligerent, so I would say we pretty much are going to call the police. If they were not belligerent and could get to their apartment, we would probably have the case manager talk to them the next day about, what's going on. And if the behavior continues to be disruptive, eviction is going to happen.
So are you going to train your staff to be on the lookout for signs of residents coming in? Could be a problem, and that would require some sort of, we'll get to you, sir. Hang on one second. We've got a guy in a yellow jacket over here. Can one of you ladies get over there? He's been waiting for a while. After this one, Andrea can go over there. Thank you. I hate to see you wasting your motions. I can all let them. So you're going to train staff on that.
Yes, we're going to train staff. But just, if people are inebriated and hurting the building, we're going to know. We have 41 tenants in there, and they know they want it to be safe there. They're going to come tell us, and we're going to be on site every day. So I think we're going to be more aware of problems than any other landlord. And we are going to be on top of it because we don't want it to get out of hand. And we will evict if they're being disruptive or violent.
All right, thank you. What, you have a quick follow-up? Chief, do you answer every call with your lights and siren blazing? She asked if they call you, if they've got a belligerent resident trying to get in, are you going to come immediately, what do you call it, emergent, with lights and sirens?
We aren't going to run code 3 unless there is an emergency. If it's a belligerent drunk particularly with trained staff, that's a code 2 call. That'll be something that...
Code 2 is not with lights.
Not, maybe red lights at the intersection if you think it's a problem, but probably not even that.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, where are we next? This lady right back here.
My name is Sue Kesterman, and I serve as pastor at Elam Lutheran Church. I also serve as the chair for Central Cities Ministries. These past several years, I've been one of the coordinators for the FM Sheltering Churches Project. I'm also a resident of Moorhead. As a pastor in a downtown congregation, it's a rare week that doesn't find me fielding calls for help from people who are struggling with homelessness. It's no secret that homelessness is on the rise in our community, across the state, and throughout the region. As chair of Central Cities Ministries and one of the organizers of the FM Sheltering Churches Project, I've been intimately involved with other faith community leaders in responding to the crisis. I've been inspired and astounded by the compassionate response shown by our community in the form of host sites for sheltering, donations of goods, services, and funds, and prayers, as well as countless volunteer hours. Early on, our planning group and other partners in the community identified the pressing need for affordable, supportive housing for individuals and families transitioning out of homelessness. Thanks to the diligent efforts of Churches United for the Homeless, the realization of just such a supportive housing project is on the horizon. I'm speaking tonight to express my support for this project and to advocate for the development of more projects of this kind. How does permanent supportive housing work? This is what we're talking about, is a permanent supportive housing project. Permanent supportive housing provides housing and supportive services to chronically homeless individuals and families who are transitioning from homelessness to being housed. Permanent supporting housing provides a systematic approach to facilitating housing stability by assessing the needs of individuals and families prior to placement and by providing case management services after individuals and families are housed. This approach strives to ensure that individuals and families are connected to needed support services in order to achieve the highest degree of stability and self-sufficiency possible. Why permanent supportive housing instead of another shelter? Shelters are not a solution to homelessness, they are a symptom. Permanent supportive housing benefits our community as a whole. When all of our community members have safe, adequate housing, the community as a whole becomes a safer place for all of our neighbors. Persons and families experiencing homelessness have multiple needs and issues that compound one another. A supportive housing environment provides more direct access to the services and supports that are needed, making a successful outcome more likely. The solution to homelessness is homes. Housing is a human right. When Jesus sums up the content of the law and the prophets, he does so in the words that have come to be known as the greatest commandment. You shall love the Lord your God with all your soul and all your mind and all your strength, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Those experiencing homelessness in our community are already our neighbors. We are called to love and care and provide for their needs, just as we would care for and provide for ourselves and for members of our own families. I'm reading this tonight, and I'm sharing it and have the signatures of other faith community leaders with whom I circulated this draft before this evening. Others who wanted their names read in support of this are the Reverend Terry Brandt, Associate to the Bishop of the Eastern North Dakota Synod of the ELCA, Reverend Dr. Kevin Cassidy Maloney, Pastor First Congregational United Church of Christ in Fargo, Reverend Joe Cassidy Maloney, member of First Congregational United Church of Christ in Fargo, Area Minister, Northern Plains Conference, United Church of Christ. Reverend Grace Murray, Pastor, Plymouth Congregational United Church of Christ in Fargo. Reverend Dr. Marilyn Spurl, Senior Pastor, First United Methodist Church in Fargo. The Reverend Mary Holte, Associate Pastor, First Presbyterian Church in Fargo. The Reverend Bert Miller, Blessed Sacrament Catholic Church, West Fargo. The Reverend Mary Folkerts, the Lutheran Church of the Cross, Good Shepherd in Moorhead. And the Reverend Jeff Sandgren, Senior Pastor, Olivet Lutheran Church in Fargo. Thank you for your time and attention.
Gentleman over here, sorry to keep you waiting, sir.
It's okay. My name is Steve Graneski, and I'm a citizen of Moorhead. And I don't know about all the folks in the room as far as how much time you've spent with boys and girls and youth and teenagers. Families who are homeless, families have been the largest, fastest growing population of people who are homeless in the United States for the last at least 25 years. So we're really talking a lot about kids and their moms and dads and grandmas and parents and guardians. So for the last year and a half or so, some college students and I have worked with almost 100 of those kids and probably close to 25 of those families. And certainly a lot of those families are struggling. But I talked to a father who called the middle school and the high school once a week to check up on his kids' attendance, how they're performing in school, and what kind of behavioral problems they might be causing or not. I always thought I was a pretty good father until I visited with that fellow. So I think when you're just thinking about the concerns about safety, do remember that a lot of the people that we're talking about are boys and girls and teenagers and youth and the adults who love and care about them very much. Thanks.
All right, thank you, sir. Lisa, we got somebody, a gentleman over here on the far right, and then Andrea, there's a lady with her hand up over here. So we'll go to this gentleman first. Go to whoever gets the microphone first. How's that? It's a race. Come on. Okay, well, we'll come back to you later. Sorry. Okay, sir.
My name is Jeremy Hayes. I believe what the lady said there, that this is a very well needed building. I am in support of Churches United. I do donate to them and buy tables at their banquets. My property backs right up to that. I've lived there for 5 years. I'm worried about our property value as well. Now, if a church was to move in there, I don't think there would be concern. If a liquor store was going to move in there, I don't think there would be concern. I have a $300,000 plus home. I have a junior going to be in high school, a freshman, and a 7-year-old. So if we're going to move, we need to move now. Do we take that gamble and stay in our home? Stay there for a few more years, let our kids graduate, and then try to sell this home and lose $100,000 in property value? Is that just our bad luck? I don't think another apartment going in there would have the same effect as this apartment. Your comments on the property value. I've asked the mayor and have gotten no answer. This neighborhood has been slow to grow. Just the last couple of years, it has started to take off. I've talked to some contractors that are working in that area. It's very hard. It's only going to be harder to build those class of homes in that neighborhood. You're not going to be able to explain to every homeowner that comes there what your facility is. They're just going to see the name, Churches United, and they're not going to choose that neighborhood. So when we put our home up for sale, they're going to drive right by it, and they're going to drive right past our home as well.
Darn.
This is an extremely common concern that is expressed by neighbors anytime this similar type of development goes up. And as a result, a number of studies have been done nationwide. And I can tell you exactly when to sell your home. 3 years after this building is up and running. That is when property values peak. And I have available, if anybody would like it, the synopsis of a study that was just done by Maxfield Research for the Family Housing Fund Public Education Initiative. And its affordable rental housing does not reduce property values. Evidence from the Twin Cities. This report was just completed and released in May 2014, this year, a month and a half ago. And it was done in a scientific manner. It reinforced studies that have been done in New York City and other places in the country, because it is an extremely common concern. These are your homes. This is probably the largest investment that you have, and it's important to know what might happen to the value of your property. So that's why these studies have been done. And these studies were actually done in Twin Cities suburbs.
So if they went in that part of town, of course, it's going to raise property values. If it's in a community with fancier homes and nicer homes, it's going to lower it. There's no way around. I know when I go look for a house, I would say, hey, where's the newest house?
And that, your concern is very valid. That's why they chose to study Inver Grove Heights, Lakeville, and Rosemont, as well as Bloomington and Minnetonka. They also studied Prior Lake, Oakdale, and Woodbury. Now, I'm no expert at Twin Cities real estate, but I don't think they're slum neighborhoods. And so what they found, that the evidence shows, is that when we were coming out of the economic turn down in the value of real estate, properties close to affordable housing's value increased at a slightly higher rate than those that were not close to affordable housing. The units that we put up, the units that Minnesota Housing authorizes are well built, they are aesthetically pleasing, and they are well maintained. And we're not going to put Churches United's name on this building. We haven't determined what the name will be, but it will be in no way something that identifies this as some place that somebody who used to be homeless at some point in their life now lives. So you have a very widespread concern, and if you would like to look at the research, I'm happy to provide anybody with a copy or a link to that website.
Okay, who's next? Back here, Lisa? Oh, sorry. Excuse me, this lady's already standing up. She's waiting. Just hold the microphone, sir. We'll get to you next, I promise.
I'm glad that Dara has that research, because that's one of the things I've been doing over the last few days as well, is looking at national research. And I also pulled out the information that's Minnesota specific, because it is so close to home and to us. I happen to live on the Fargo side, but I'd be more than happy to have this development in my neighborhood, and I'll give you a couple of reasons why. First and foremost, and I'm very interested in the homeless. I've been working with the Winter Sheltering Project along with Pastor Sue Kesterman for the last 3 years, and we do have a growing population of homeless people. We are talking about men, women, and children, a growing number of women and children who are homeless, nearly 100 every day, which has been talked about before. But the Minnesota research, it says exactly what Dara is saying. The primary concern most of us have when a project like this is going to be developed is our property values and crime rates. And the research bears out exactly the opposite. Projects managed by nonprofit organizations increase property values. They do so when compared to other apartment complexes because these individuals are they want to maintain these properties, and they do so. They make a commitment to having them look good, to having them be clean, to having a safe environment. Multiple studies across the nation, as Dara has pointed out, show that these projects have no impact on neighborhood crime rates. And again, they've explained what they've been trying to do as far as keeping the neighborhood safe, and they have gone far and above what any other apartment complex would do if they moved into. I mean, that property could have been bought by any for-profit entity, and you would not have the level of security that they are talking about here. These types of properties also influence educational outcomes in your community and for these children, because when these families have supportive environments and they have security and stability and parenting skills, teachers are better able to focus on educational outcomes. They're not doing remedial education. It increases the wealth in your community. These are people that once they get jobs, they have an opportunity to go on and become homeowners and contributing taxpayers in your community. And they also increase the earnings of these individuals because they have housing stability. That's what they do on a community level. What do they do on an individual level? These kinds of supportive housings free up some of the family resources so they can buy more nutritious food. It reduces the stress that they feel and any associated health issues, whether that's chronic health issues, whether that's mental health issues. And it does lead to improvements in mental health stability and physical safety as well. Where are these people staying today? I can tell you where they're staying because I've been involved in some of the Wilder study results, and I do hear and in paying attention to the reports that come back. I dealt with a family this week. I'm a nurse. We have a mother and a father of a very small infant. Where have they been staying? They've been staying in a car for 30 days in our community because our shelters are overflowing right now. That's why we do the winter sheltering. And then I'll take it down to a very, very personal level. Someone else mentioned, if you go back not too very far in any one of your families, but for the grace of God, this could be any one of you. And it has been me and my family. 30 years ago, my sister moved out of North Dakota with a spouse. She had 2 young children. She was living in the state of Oregon, and the calls with our family were less and less. What we didn't realize is that she was living in a family with abuse. She ended up with a pregnancy loss as a result of her abuse. She turned to her local priest, who could have said to her, and her house was burned to the ground. She and her children were not safe. She turned to her local priest, and he could have said, a woman and a child, it's not proper to stay in the rectory overnight. I don't feel safe, and I don't want my church property damaged. But Father Patrick did not say that. He said, welcome, my child. And the next day, he drove over 100 miles across the mountains to take her to a shelter, just like Churches United. For the past 28 years, my sister has been very successful because she got reconnected, she got support, she got out of that environment. She went into retail, became a store manager, was very successful at that. She got the job of going to other stores and turning them around for her country. She became a regional manager. She has been remarried, has had 2 additional children, and today her oldest son, who was desperately affected by this, was not successful as a parent. 6 years ago, she adopted her 3-year-old granddaughter, and she's been successfully parenting her granddaughter. A woman who worked with me in Northern Maine, Tina, 30-year-old Tina, was not so lucky. Tina didn't have anywhere to go. There were no shelters. There were no supportive housing. Tina couldn't take it anymore and finally told her husband she was leaving. He shot her, their 4-year-old daughter, their 2-year-old son. He wrote a suicide note, put them in the car, in 2 cars, and 2 copies, one in each car in the driveway, came into the house, threw flammable liquid across the house, started a fire, and shot himself. The fire department arrived in 7 minutes, and the roof was gone. There was no saving that family. This type of housing is needed in this community. It is desperately needed. We have a 10-year plan to end homelessness. We have a 10-year plan. The state of Minnesota has granted funding, and they've applied for this funding. A very short window from when the legislature agreed to release this funding to us saying we can apply for this type of funding, and this fits with our vision across our entire region for ending homelessness. I I commend you. I commend you for the hours and hours and hours of time you put in trying to create something and for entertaining these type of conversations and for inviting ongoing conversation. I would be proud, and I will be over there working with your individuals because I would be very committed to do so.
This lady right here that just came up to me, so I followed her.
I think the mic got turned on.
Thank you. This lady here that just gave this sermon speech a little while ago and to all these people that endorsed it. How many of those people are living over in this area? I bet none of them. I'm a Moorhead resident. I don't give. Do you live in that area right there? Yes or no? No, but I don't. Then okay, your answer is no. That's it. You don't live there. So you don't really live there.
Okay, hold on. Let's just let this gentleman make his point, please. Sir, go ahead.
Okay, why isn't the area where you just built an apartment complex a couple of years ago, why isn't that area on the other side of that being considered? And you say you didn't get enough notice because of the environmental impact report. When did you ask for that environmental impact report? Because that don't happen overnight. You had to know that you were going to do this, or had the inclination that you were going to do this months before that. Environmental impact reports don't happen over. You don't walk in there and say, I need an environmental impact report on this land and walk out like you do a building permit to build a shed.
You are correct. We pulled in a lot.
So you had lots of notice.
No, we didn't. We pulled
Yes,
in
you
a lot.
did. You had notice from the day you went to the environmental agency and asked for impact on that property. From then on, you knew you were probably going to do something. Yeah, that's when you should have came to us instead of letting all of us find out the last hour, the 11th hour and 59th minute, like you did. You backdoored everybody.
We started in April.
Then we should have known in April.
We did not know if we would be going forward with the purchase of this land at that point in time. As far as, it was not a federal environmental impact study, it was an environmental assessment that we contracted for with environmental engineers to ensure the safety and the stability of the soils on that property. And you're right, it doesn't happen overnight, and we had to call in a lot of favors in order to get it turned around in a time frame that was reasonable. We are very grateful to the people who put us ahead of everybody else on the schedule and turned it around in a remarkable period of time. But I can promise you, we have not had this in the works for months.
Yeah, well, you just said since April, so to me, that's months. That ain't 1 month, that ain't 1 day or 1 week, that's months. Okay, my second question was, why aren't you developing that area over by the apartment houses over there by that church?
Well, as I said before, I'm the executive director of the Clay County Housing and Redevelopment Authority, and we own Gateway Gardens. And we are serving a very different population at that location. You can call me maternalistic or whatever you would like. I do not think that that location is a great place to raise kids. It's between First Avenue North and the railroad tracks. It's in an industrial area, a commercial area. I could get in the weeds with you, but the infrastructure in place there was not designed for residential housing. It was designed for commercial. Kids need a place to play.
Well, okay, but you built an apartment complex over there, right?
What's that question? I'm sorry.
You built an apartment complex a couple of years ago there, right?
Right, we did, and it's...
You got kids in there? Do you have kids in there?
No, we don't. We built it for single individuals, and they are all one-bedroom units. We never designed this with children in mind. We specifically designed it for a place for adults with significant issues to reside. We are handling a harder to serve population in that location than what we are proposing in your neighborhood. We're taking the toughest to serve at that location.
What?
We're admitting the hardest to serve at the location that you're referring to. We're not looking at that same population for your neighborhood. They're very different populations. All of those units are one bedroom only, and a lot of those folks have significant issues in their past.
Okay, another question just came up then. How many people in that Churches United place on First or whatever it is that's in there right now has been arrested for something, no matter how minor, been arrested for whatever, theft, petty theft, whatever, and is now back in their living?
Back in the house. Is that arrested?
So are you asking about people who live at Gateway Gardens, the apartment building?
Well, yeah, in that one or the church that's right there on
Churches United. I can tell you, even though we're taking, the chief probably questions us at times, we're taking folks that are hard to house at the Gateway Gardens location.
Because of criminal activity?
It's for a variety of issues. We haven't had to have one person leave in the last year and a half. We have 24-hour staff on site. We monitor it. I'm not going to say people are perfect. I will tell you that you are safer with the folks living in that building than you would be if they were living on the streets. I can promise you that.
What street they're living on?
What's that? I'm sorry.
Don't hold the street.
Sir, excuse me. Don't hold the mic quite so close to your mouth.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I got another question too, because I haven't been here that long. So I called this telephone number on this flyer that got dropped off my house, okay? And I spoke to a young lady down there. I said, where is this church at? And she goes, she gave me an address, and I'll read it to you. She goes, it's Broadway and 2nd across from the VFW. I said, what? I said, you're going to go to Fargo for a meeting happening in Moorhead? I don't think so. She goes, well, I don't know. She said, just a minute. Let me put you in. She put me on hold. After 8 minutes, I hung up and called back. I figured I should have put me on hold and get rid of me. I called back. I talked to another gentleman. He says, well, I don't know. A guy by the name of Mike will be out of the meeting in a few minutes. Call back in 10 minutes. I call back in 10 minutes. Same guy answered the phone. Oh, Mike, he just walked out the door. I went across the neighbor to find out where this place was. Is this paper here a joke? You read this piece of paper and tell me where the address is.
I apologize. That's my fault. I, for some reason, thought everybody knew where Trinity Church was. And you know, when you look up Trinity Church in the phone book, it just gives the Trinity Preschool. It doesn't even give the address of Trinity Church. So I really apologize. When we reprinted it, we did put an address, and I am sorry. We are very thinly staffed right now at Churches United, and I have probably failed to communicate to the frontline staff what they needed to know to help people get to this meeting. I am sorry.
Okay, and my last thing.
Yeah, this is your last question. We've got people.
All right, that's fine, that's fine. This 55-plus senior citizen place is going to be just adjacent to your place. What, are you guys going to put a fence up so people can't wander into like that lady was saying over there? Are you going to fence in that area back there so people can't walk in these people's backyard? What method, what security are you going to provide these people?
I will certainly consider, we will certainly consider a fence if that provides a sense
You
of
will
security.
consider or you will?
We will. I mean, fences of that nature are very expensive, but sometimes fences make good neighbors, so I will certainly consider it.
And that's one of the things we want input on from that resident association is if you want a fence there, and if you do, what type of material would be most appealing to you, what type of access to walkways would you want. We want to, even though some people can't believe me, we actually do want to work with you on that. That if we put up a fence, we want it to be something that we've talked about together.
This gentleman right there. Okay, I got turned off again somehow. Swap, yeah. No, that's not good. Jan, do you think could we be losing battery power on those?
This one seems to work. We just moved into the Arbor Park area, and at first I was concerned about the declining property values, but it sounds like that maybe is not true. I guess the question that I have is, what is the purpose of this meeting? Like, if it's already done, you've already bought the property, what is the result? Like, you're going to take our feedback, but you don't have to listen to us. Right? You can still go ahead and do whatever you want because you already own the property. So what is the end game here? Like what impact does the community have? Yes, we can give our opinions, but that doesn't mean that you have to
is a great question because we put some time into this to even be here tonight. One is to, believe it or not, to in some way, when people speak of offense, it's good for us to hear it. There have been misconceptions floating around. We all know how that goes, and so it was an opportunity to address them also with maybe some of the right info that's not secondhand. And it was to come together as a community and to, at least as Churches United, it's comprised of 58 churches that support the ministry. And so we figured people would come and we wanted to hold a forum. But you're right, the land was zoned for our ministry to purchase, and so this was more to make the connection and to establish some facts, but also there are some things, our board is here tonight with a listening ear, and there will be some things that will have to be talked about as we listen this evening too.
Andrea, is your mic working again?
Yeah.
Okay. The gal with the camera, did you want to speak? I saw you had your hand up, so she's had her hand up for a while. I thought I should go give her a chance.
Hi. First, before I speak, I want to say that despite the fact that I have a camera, I'm speaking independently of Moorhead Community Access Media. What I'm about to say does not reflect their opinion at all.
Disclaimer, thank you. That's good.
My boss might still be angry at me for saying this, but this does not reflect Moorhead Community Access Media. I am a filmmaker, and this year I did a documentary on homelessness in North Dakota, how it's grown. I was born in Fargo. At the age of 5, I moved to Fergus Falls. And at the age of 18, I moved back to Moorhead. And I've lived here ever since. And I'm now 28 years old. And I have seen, as the last decade has gone on, the homeless population in the face of this city that I was born in change rapidly and permanently. In our society, if someone robs a grocery store, or if someone has a DUI, or someone commits a sexual offense, we do not seek the death penalty. Being homeless in this area of the country is a death penalty. In my documentary, I spoke with a number of people who worked with an individual who died this last season because he was homeless. People ask and say, why do they have to live here? I don't believe that anyone asking that question thinks that homeless people don't deserve a place to live. We all agree that homeless people deserve a place to live. But my question is, if not here, then where? Someone has to stand up and say, yes, here. And this neighborhood has the opportunity to do that. Another neighborhood also has the opportunity to do that, but we're asking your neighborhood, not because we have to, but because they have to live somewhere. So why not here? Why not here?
Thank you. Well, I don't know, back there by you, Lisa.
My name is Sandra Roars, and I am a director, a board member.
Sandra, don't hold the mic quite so close to your mouth.
At Churches United for the Homeless. And I think our entire board is here tonight. And we are here to listen to your concerns and to move forward with those concerns, knowing them and helping to alleviate them. And I would like our board to stay on tonight so you can know how supportive this board is of this project and how we will do everything we can to be good neighbors. My fellow board members, will you please stand?
Okay, a gentleman here has his hand up, and Andrew's coming your way. We said we'd run until about 9 o'clock, so we got about 13 minutes to go.
My name is Reverend Dr. Kevin Cassidy Maloney. I serve as pastor at First Congregational United Church of Christ in Fargo. I was grateful that Pastor Sue put together the letter she read earlier. One of the things about my calling as pastor that I take very seriously is that I'm ethically obligated, ethically compelled to minister to all kinds of people, not just the people who have always been good, no law, no legal problems and such, or the people who've been successful financially, but the whole range of people. And I really believe that as a community, the same is true, that we really are in this thing together. We've been here, my wife and I have been here for 8 years. We live in Fargo, but we live in Fargo, but essentially we live in Fargo Moorhead, the two communities of one, Dilworth, West Fargo, and so forth. And that's been one of the things that's really impressed me about these communities is our ability to work together. And it just seems to me you get a whole lot more accomplished when you work together. And it's been, and when we, one of the other churches in Fargo says we leave the judging to God. And I really believe that very strongly. I'm not in a position to judge anyone. What I am in a position to do is to try to help those who are in need. And I've been concerned about some of the language tonight. There's been a lot of me, my, our, and I understand that there's a proprietary concern for our neighborhood, our family, and such. But if we're not careful, that kind of language can become very divisive, very insular, and very fear-based. And I don't think that's all that helpful. I'm reminded of Winston Churchill, the beginning of World War II, and he said, "We either learn to live together as brothers, or we shall perish together as fools." And in many ways, I think we have a crisis here of equal proportion. We either learn to deal with this thing together and reach out to our sisters and brothers in need, or the whole community is going to be in terrible shape and we'll all be accountable. I think this is a wonderful opportunity. Thank you to Churches United for your foresight and for your diligence and courage in the face of opposition.
All right, thank you. Question over here. Stand up, man. Thank you.
I don't actually have a question, I have a comment. I think there's a misconception that our neighborhood, which is adjacent to 34th, is against homeless shelters or against the homeless people. We are not, and we are very willing to share. Yes, if we have one building, we do not expect next year to have 6 there. Go ahead and share with each person in their area also. And I think it would be better for your homeless, and according to what I'm hearing, it's better for your property value in each community, and it's better for each person to have a shelter within a certain distance of their residence. So I'm asking you, with your 10 acres, if you put up one apartment building, please do not put up more than that, because you're overburdening one area, and we are certainly willing to share. No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Right over here, I see a hand.
I've been involved with Churches United for many, many years, back when we were in the white church. And I think if all of you could see the people that are there, they could be your children, they could be your grandchildren, they could be your great-grandchildren. All of us probably have times in our life. I was a single mom for quite a few years with 4 little boys. And we need help. If I would have had to go out and try and find housing, I wouldn't have had the money to do it. And our housing is really difficult in this town, in this whole area. To find affordable housing, you need your first month's rent, you need your deposit. And when you've been homeless for a while, you have none of that. base to help you. If you've got parents around that can help, that's wonderful. Then you have the help. But as far as the security and as far as having the neighbors that you're concerned about, I have a very good friend who has lived in a beautiful area for about at least 25 years. When she moved in, it was a wonderful building. It was well maintained. It had a good manager. It was clean. It changed owners, and it ran down a little bit. She has had neighbors there that the police have been there because they're drug dealers. This is down around the Island Park area. Nobody is safe having apartments or neighbors. If you want to protect yourself against everything, it's impossible. Because the thing is, the people that are moving into these buildings have been screened. They know they want a second chance. They want a place to raise their children. Can you imagine having your children picked up at a homeless shelter and what that does to them? It's not, they need a place that they can just call home, even if it's just an apartment, if it's one room, if it's something that they can call home. And the thing is that these people, the background is known. They know they've overcome a lot of hardships, and anybody that is renting anywhere, you don't know what it is. And maybe they don't have any criminal background, but they probably haven't been caught yet. So if we worry about everybody instead of accepting, we're going to turn into a very, very fearful country. Of course, looking at our newspapers and reading them, we probably think there's crime going on in every corner of our town lately. So anyway, but this is a good thing, and it will help an awful lot of people.
All right, thank you. Gentleman back here.
Hello, I came to this meeting and I just wanted to be well informed more than anything else. And what came across very much is that, you know what, I can understand the concerns of people in that neighborhood. It seems like there's a lot of, the whole theme of the night is ask for forgiveness instead of permission. You know, and it wasn't necessarily that well handled, but I understand the time crunch, and I understand how it's difficult to get the input of a whole community when you've got other sites that you're looking at, and you're not as well staffed as you'd like to be. So it's easy to see both sides. But the one thing that's difficult to see, or for me to imagine, is what it must feel like to be homeless. And it strikes me that it could take just one car accident or one unfortunate incident for any number of us to be in that position. And you know what? You guys are doing a great job, but you know, living in a shelter, it doesn't sound great, you know? And when I think about how the process of moving from a shelter to a place that's stable, and what an immense sense of gratefulness that can give. I just think that that's something that could bring such joy to a community. And you know what? I feel like there are a lot of concerns that people have, and they needed to be addressed. And I think that you've done a really good job. But more than anything else, I think that this is something that our community needs. We've got a really difficult housing market, and I think that this will really help a lot of people who might be in a position that any of us could find ourselves in one day.
All right. Thank you, sir. Lady back right behind you. Lisa, right behind you on the wall. Nancy.
Hi, I'm Nancy out of Moorhead City Council from First Ward, and I've had contact with many of you through emails, through phone calls, and I very, very much appreciate your concerns, and I absolutely share your concerns. I'd just like to read from one of the emails just one of them that we received. This is a person that actually works at Gateway Gardens. She says, while there have been a variety of tenants who have occupied the units in the building, there have also been a fair share of substance abuse issues, violence, and disorderly conduct. As a result of these incidents, there have been numerous occasions where police have been called to the building, either for a tenant or for a guest or a visitor of a tenant. Many of these incidences have been alcohol-related. Gateway Gardens also is staffed 24 hours with case management and general security. However, I feel that the influence of such service is ignored or taken for granted by the tenants, as the case management services are encouraged but not required. And I think that's something that is very, very much on the minds of the people here, especially after Ms. Alexander was before City Council. We asked about background checks. The only thing that you had mentioned to us that would be eliminated from living in these buildings would be sexual misconduct. That's it. Anybody else, as far as we were told, would be allowed in these buildings. I was the council member that asked for the police calls. Just in 2014 at Gateway Gardens, warrant wanted, narcotics, suspicious, impaired person, disturbance, impaired person, and the list goes on. I mean, if you're going back through 2012, bicycle theft, impaired person, fraud, impaired driver, warrant wanted, impaired person, warrant, disturbance, on and on. So you can understand why there are concerns. There's legitimate concerns. Anybody who thinks that this is not going to change that neighborhood, I'm sorry, I just don't agree with you. I think it will change that neighborhood. And I also did hear from some of the nearby store owners. Some of the things that they mentioned were that panhandling occurs. They're very concerned that it'll get worse. The staff has to frequently, when the panhandlers get some money, they go out, purchase liquor, go out behind their store and drink it. And then they have to wait for 20 or 30 minutes till the police arrives. They have to babysit the people. He's concerned that'll get worse. He employs 16 and 17-year-old girls. He's concerned about their safety. He's concerned about the tight job market, and if there's a perception of lack of safety, then it will be very much more restricted for him to get employees. And he's also concerned for customers. So these are, you're on a fact-finding mission. Us council members have been hit and hit hard with concerns. You have to know that. We have been hit. And so I just think it's only fair that you also hear some of the things that we're hearing. I'm just touching the tip of the iceberg here. The people here mentioned many, many things. And so I guess if you're on a fact-finding mission, maybe you need to talk to some of your own staff, find out why there is obviously they're taking it for granted, your services. They're encouraged but not required. And I guess I just want to know why. If you're providing free housing, the taxpayers of Minnesota are providing free housing, but yet they're not being required to go through any type of drug screening or anything like that, I think that is a concern.
Dara, you said that Gateway Gardens is one of your buildings, right? The housing authority? Yeah, it's not a Churches United.
Correct. That is
so you want to tackle those issues that Alderwoman Otto brought up?
Yes, I certainly would. As I said before, we're serving a much different population at Churches United than will be served at this new development. I see people shaking their heads, and I know that the proof is in the pudding. You're not going to trust that statement until you see who actually moves in. Also, I asked the police chief on the breakdown on those calls if they were able to give some detail, because of course, as a landlord, that's extremely concerning to us as well. What I can tell you is we've had extremely few arrests out of that building. We have had complaints. We do have it staffed 24/7, so if somebody approaches our door, although not a resident, we immediately contact the police and report an intoxicated person on our premises and ask that they be removed. And I can't give you the specific, I'm not going to tell you we've never had an intoxicated person in our apartment building, nor do I think that any of the other landlords in town can tell you they've never had an intoxicated person in their apartment building. But it is an apartment, and when you talk about drug screening and other screening, I don't know of any of us who've moved into an apartment who had to pass a drug test and/or to buy a house in a specific neighborhood. If there is a lease violation, they are addressed. If there is any suspected criminal activity, it is reported to the police. We want people engaged in illegal activity arrested, and we will evict them if that is found. What you have are complaints. What we don't have is any proof. And we still, I think, live in the U.S., and so people are still, I think, considered innocent until proven guilty. And so if anybody were actually charged with an activity like that, they would be immediately removed from the property. And then,
I would guess also then that you're going to, I mean, since it was a staff member who wrote this email to Councilwoman Otto, it was written to you, ma'am?
That person
you're going to look into staff training and see if you can...
Yes, that person is actually an employee or a former employee of CCRI. Dave Pompey was the supervisor at that location and has informed me that in no way was this employee in any way, shape, or form speaking on behalf of that entity. If those were concerns of the employee, they should have been brought to the supervisor and or the management that pays those salaries so that we could address it. I guess just as council member Otto has been hit by the public hard on this, I guess I don't appreciate as the director of the ownership entity having the first complaint on this level from the staff person go directly to the city council. Those are things that need to be addressed and that we would address.
But the correct answer is you'll be looking into it.
We already have.
All right, thank you. There's a gentleman back here who had his hand up for a while. Go ahead, sir. No, the guy behind you.
Thanks. My name is Matt. I think there's been a lot of conversation already about Gateway Gardens and the proposed building, which I think have demonstrated that's a pretty weak analogy between the two. So I guess I just want to remind the councilwoman and everyone here that a lot of those complaints about the Gateway Gardens are not relevant to this conversation.
Was there somebody else back there? Otherwise, this gentleman wants to make another comment. Right up here.
Do I need a mic?
I don't know, do you? Maybe if you stood up.
I think we all agree that we need a place for the homeless and that we need help homeless. It's a Christian thing to do. We're not denying that. As I view this group in here, and as I sit here and listen to the comments that are made, I see two groups. I see groups from out of the region or out of the neighborhood who are sitting here saying, this is good, we should do this. We're sitting there saying the same thing, we should do this, but not a big complex in our neighborhood. Put 7 or 8 of them around the city of Moorhead. Give us one little apartment. You know, we can live with that. We don't want a complex. We don't want the foot in the door. We don't want 10 acres of people that could potentially be problems, you know. Send some out to South Moorhead. I want to hear the roar that goes out there when you poke your head out North Moorhead and South Moorhead and say, we're bringing in a homeless shelter in your neighborhood.
We want to send some to Fargo too, and maybe West Fargo as well.
It's not a homeless shelter. It's an apartment, I think.
Well, okay, a homeless apartment.
No, they won't be homeless when they're in there. Pass the mic to this lady. This is going to be the last question because we're about out of time. Thank you, sir.
Well, you were saying that you wanted to hear what you're here to hear, the people that this will affect. I mean, I appreciate that there's a lot of people that support you, but there are those of us that directly, it affects us. Thanks. I guess for us, for me, a large privacy fence would be great. Since we do foster care, the privacy would be great so that they can't just look down in into our yard and see little children that we take in. Also, the safety, the fence, I believe, on both sides would be great. Even, just for the children in the complex, Jane and I talked about this. They need safety in there. This 34th Avenue is busy, or 34th Street, sorry. Also, you said a place for trikes and bikes. Yeah, they need a park in there. Otherwise, they're going to be cutting through the drainage ditch, and that fills up in the spring. So you definitely need a park. You definitely need a place for them to play. You need to make it an environment where they'll want to be there. There's a lot of green grass already there. There's a great grove of trees. Make a park. So that's my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate everyone coming out. It's been, we're over time, but we want to give these folks a chance to thank you, and then we'll say goodnight. So thank you all for coming. Jane?
Yes. Really, truly thank you. I think I speak for the staff and the board. We really appreciated what you've said, and we're going to, incorporate it into all of our going forward. We do have a mission, and we are trying to carry it out. And I think that our mission, our philosophy at Churches United is love, grace, hospitality, and service. And it is one that is just alive and well in this community. And it is that kind of spirit that has made sure that every person has had a place at night inside in the winter. Every homeless person has had a place inside. And I think that that's the kind of philosophy or, work or action plan that will help us transform shelter into home. And I really know that it's going to be better if you're helping us do that. And I welcome you to do it. In the meantime, before we get our grant, before we build, before lots of things happen, there's the possibility of using a community garden there. And in the spirit of what we're trying to do, we would love for you to come to the Blessing of the Land next Tuesday at 3. There are different faith communities that will be offering a prayer to make sure that this is a corner of Moorhead that is very life-giving and positive for everyone. And following that, there's a picnic at 4 in Gooseberry Park, and we would be so honored if the neighbors would come. This meeting has been for the neighbors first and foremost, and though we are very appreciative of the people supporting it to be here, the neighbors are the honored guests really here. And so your words are truly important to us. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate you coming and taking the time to be here.